The next trait of academic writing that I want to talk about is the trait of voice. Voice can be really slippery and really difficult to understand outside of your English teacher. You've probably had an English teacher say you're using the wrong voice. And we don't mean passive and active voice. We use the word voice in a lot of different ways in the English world. So I want to take a look at what this trait really means. So quote from William Wadsworth, fill your paper with the breathings of your heart. And that really gets at what voice is. Voice is about your personality coming through in the writing. Okay, so here's the trait. You can find the handout. It's posted in this unit with voice. It's posted in the last unit with word choice and sentence fluency. So it's there. You can find it. Here's the trait. This is what I'm looking for. And this one gets missed a lot. A definite point of view which does not waver. So the consistent use of I, one, and other point of view indicators no you. And we talked about the use of the word you earlier in this semester. That's a big, gosh, the word you makes my hair stand on end. That's definitely something you should take out of your writing. These other words, I, or first person pronouns I and we should probably come out of your writing for the most part in English. They absolutely need to come out of your writing in other disciplines. They will mark you very poorly for using I in other disciplines. So those things we've kind of covered in the past, so we're not switching from one to they or a person to one. We're being consistent in how we're using those kind of pronouns. It's these ones that we haven't really covered yet, and they do relate back to word choice and sentence fluency. So obvious person behind the words, that means that we're using word choices that display who the personality is. It's not just robotic or mechanical. So these are the things that we're looking at. The question is, how do we do that? How do we get there from, okay, so I kind of understand I'm not using you or I, but what does it mean to really have a strong voice in my writing? So voice is the reader-writer connection. It's that sound when you're reading. It's the sound in your head that makes you say, oh yeah, I could listen to this. I could read more of this. Energy, vitality, individuality, zest. It's what makes your writing different from your neighbor's writing. Some of these we think about more in fictional prose. This third one, writing is alive with voice, is hard to put down. Voiceless writing is a chore to read. And I know you're thinking to yourself, well, all academic writing is a chore to read. And that's not necessarily true. It's different. It's certainly not a John Grisham novel or a Stephen King novel. It has a different voice than pleasure reading, the non-academic reading, and you'll start to hear different voices from the different texts that you read. So even if it's subtle, it should be there. The personal imprint of the writer on the page. So like I said, it's like your fingerprint. It makes your writing unique. You're going to choose a different word than somebody else would. Again, you're unique. Voice is part concern for the reader, part enthusiasm for the topic, and part personal style. So just like we don't all dress the same, we don't all write the same. We do need to be concerned about what our reader is reading, so making it interesting for the reader, letting your personality show through. So it's going to change with your purpose and audience. So if your purpose is straightforward, informational, that's going to be different than if your purpose is, advertising jingle. I can't think of two things that are more vastly different. Think about the dialect artifacts that you looked at. How was the voice different in those two artifacts? If one is trying to be more formal, there's probably less bubbly personality in there. The one that's more casual is probably trying to really be personable through their word choice. It's what connects your reader to your heart and soul, to what's coming out of you, your feelings about this topic, which is why it is so hard to write well when you don't care about the topic. And a lot of you say that in your the writing histories that I've gotten from you, the literacy history letter, for example, a lot of you said, I just can't write when I don't care about the topic. And I personally think that that's about voice. If I don't care about the topic, I find it hard to imbue the writing with enthusiasm, and therefore my writing is dull, it's flat. It's not interesting for the reader, it's not interesting for me. I think that's about voice. Personality, flavor, style, papers with a strong voice. The writer speaks directly to the reader and is sensitive to the reader's needs. So you're anticipating that the reader needs an in-text citation, that the reader needs signal phrases, that the reader needs a vivid word here, that the reader needs you to break up your sentences, because short, stocky sentences are dull to read, as are long, convoluted sentences that meander around and around. So you're aware of that as a developing writer. And again, these things are all about practice. It's being aware of what you're trying to do and practicing. It doesn't come easily. It doesn't come overnight. So that's why we're talking about it. Okay, so how do we get there? So here's a tip or an acronym to help you remember. So the acronym is PEAS, personality. So you're selecting powerful details, vivid words, drafting engaging sentences. So details, words, and sentences, those show your personality. And again, it's so much easier when it's a topic that you're interested in. But it's possible to do even with a topic that bores you. Think about what active words you would choose, what details you would choose if you did care about the topic, and pick those. So personality can be in there even if you're not interested in the topic. Emotion. Probably if you hate the topic, I wouldn't, and your teacher loves the topic, that probably might not be the right emotion to show. But passion, or if it's a distasteful topic, if you're writing about, drowning puppies in the river, the distaste that you have for that can come through, that this is not a positive thing. And this last sentence, academic writing doesn't always have to be rigid and unfeeling. And I know it feels that way a lot of times, that the things that you're reading are not contemporary prose. They're more stilted. They do have less emotion. And in some disciplines, there's no emotion at all. But a lot of times you can get in that flair, that vividness. And then again, audience. I'm going to keep coming back to this idea of audience. Use details, examples, and words suited to that group. So if you have an audience that expects a high level of academic language, that you're fulfilling that expectation. If you're writing a blog or you're writing a Facebook post, probably not what they're expecting. So you're going to have a different set of expectations. So let's take a look at examples. Again, these are simple examples. I took them out of some kids' books, just because I want you to hear what the language is. So paragraph A. Last weekend, my parents took my sister and I to the zoo. We saw flamingos, elephants, giraffes, and zebras. My sister tried to feed the giraffe and was really grossed out because it had a really slimy black tongue. I laughed at her. We also ate snacks at the zoo, such as cotton candy and ice cream cones. It was a really fun day. So nothing wrong with the sentence or the paragraph. There's no fragments, there's no run-ons, although that one in the middle, I might suggest the student changes up a little bit. But yeah, an acceptable paragraph. Let's take a look how it would sound with some different voice. And again, this is not an academic text, just an example. So January 21, 2011, the best day of my life. Why? It started out like any other day, bus, school, lunch, specials, home. However, after school was finished, I went to my best friend's birthday party. At the party, we ate chocolate cake, my favorite, and drank enough soda to drown an elephant. After gorging ourselves, my friends and I flopped on the couch to watch the divine Josh Hutcherson in the Hunger Games. What a night. So we can see some clear differences. Obviously, paragraph B has more voice, has more personality in there. And if we take a look through the paragraph with the PEAS acronym, personality, emotion, and audience, we can certainly see it. Vivid words, bus, school, lunch, those are specific. We know what this person is doing. My best friend's birthday party, we know what the relationship is. So there's vivid word choices there. Sentences vary. So there's some long sentences, there's some short sentences. There's a sentence fragment. We start with a sentence fragment. And while I wouldn't recommend that in your academic essays, it works here. It creates interest, creates movement through the paragraph. So we're not just reading redundant short sentences, or we're not reading these convoluted long sentences. And then the personality of the writer shows through. We know that the writer likes chocolate cake, soda, and Josh Hutcherson. So we know these things that we did not know in the first paragraph, other than the fact that the writer was grossed out by giraffe tongues. We didn't really get much personality. So how do we do this? So here's some things to check off as you're reading and rereading. So does this writing sound like me? And you're not thinking about you, in your casual, down home with your friends. Does this sound like my academic voice? And your academic voice is probably still developing. Mine is still developing, and I've been doing this for quite a few years. The question is, does it have a personality? Does it sound like who you would want to be if you were, professor with your, pipe smoking, sitting in a library with a bunch of books? Does it sound like you? Do I really like this paper? Is it something that you could say, yeah, I'm in here. This is me. Does it say what you think and feel? And again, this is going to depend on your audience. So some audiences want more of that feeling. How you're evaluating the things that you're presenting. Some of them just want straight presentation. You've got to know what the expectations of the audience are. Energy and passion, and again, looking through for word choices. Does it make your readers feel how you want them to feel? And that might be a good question for an outside reader. Get somebody else to give you some feedback. And is it appropriate for audience and purpose? So I want to take an example. This is a pretty long example from a student's research paper, because I want you to see or to hear more precisely how we can put voice into a text, even if it's, I'm using finger quotes here, a dry academic essay. So this essay, the student was writing about e-readers and whether they should be used in schools or not. So I'll read it to you, and here again, you're thinking about momentum, you're thinking about word choice, personality, and see what you think about this. According to Julia Glum, there is a higher percentage of ebooks being bought and used by persons over 30 when compared to the 1/5 in 13 to 17 age group and 23% in the 18 to 29 age group for casual reading. It is their belief that ebooks are not user-friendly. Annika Atkinson, 29-year-old engineer, stated, quote, "I like being able to feel the pages of a book in my hands when I read. There's something about being able to turn the pages of a book as you immerse yourself in the story." Glum. This sentiment was also shared by Patrice Smith, who is a 31-year-old physical therapist. 22-year-old recent university graduate Natasha Blake, on the other hand, prefers ebooks for her casual reading. Blake cites the reasons for her preference as, quote, "for portability, affordability, and the storage. Storage in the sense that I can be walking around with thousands of books on my device, whereas with the actual book, there's only so many I can carry at a time." This statement by Blake seems to hold a valid point. There's an ability to be reading several books at a time, or if someone is taking a long trip where they would be wishing to take along some books to read and pass time, it is more convenient to take along a tablet filled with several books than to pack a bag filled with books. So if you couldn't tell, that one was difficult to read. There's some long sentences, even this first sentence up here, that we could cut down and make into more useful passages. There's some redundancy here. The sentiment was also shared by Patrice Smith. The student is trying to make the point that this certain age group prefers paper books to ebooks, but it seems like one too many examples. We've already got the 29-year-old, we probably don't need the 31-year-old. And then vivid words. There's some words that stand out. Recent university graduate, that's a nice way to describe Natasha Blake. But then the word choice, I'm thinking specifically about this first sentence. It feels like just relating dry statistics. And the student needs to relate those statistics. Those are supporting the student's argument over whether ebooks should be replacing print books in schools and classrooms. But the way that it's presented is very dry and unengaging. So I've revised this paragraph considering voice. So let's see how this one reads and if you notice any differences. According to Julia Glum, there is a higher percentage of ebooks being bought and used by persons over the age of 30 than younger age groups. One may assume that the youngest group, 13 to 17-year-olds, would be the most interested in using the advanced technology, but Glum finds that only 20% of these adolescents use e-readers. The next older group, the 18 to 29 age group, uses e-readers at a dismal rate, 23%, for casual reading. Glum reports that the younger participants believe that e-readers are not user-friendly. 29-year-old engineer Annika Atkinson shares her nostalgic rationale. I like being able to feel the pages of a book in my hands when I read. There's something about being able to turn the pages of a book as you immerse yourself in the story. Breaking with her age cohort, 22-year-old recent university graduate Natasha Blake prefers ebooks for her casual reading. Blake cites the reasons for her preference as portability, affordability, and the storage. Storage in the sense that I can be walking around with thousands of books on my device, whereas the actual book, there's only so many I can carry at a time. Blake makes a valid and common point. E-readers allow the user to read several books or carry multiple volumes at a time, a convenience for travel, school, or any other book-intensive activity. So that one, reading that one, it was much easier for me, and I recommend you read some of these out loud to yourself just so you can see how it rolls off the tongue. And you'll see some of the words that I've chosen reflect who I am. So it's a nostalgic rationale. It's not just a rationale, but it's a throwback in time. These punctuation marks allow us to do the aside. Blake makes a valid and common point. That's something that we would do in spoken English all the time. We do these asides, we do these sub conversations, and we can indicate that in our language, through our written language too. And you'll notice that these last three sentences here, I've completely restructured because the original ones were just kind of a mess there at the end. They just kind of went on and on and on and took us around different places. And this is a little bit more concise and condensed. We still have the same information, but this one has a little bit more pop. A little bit more language choices and punctuation choices that make it pop a little bit more. And you heard, even as I was reading, I can see some errors that I made. So reading out loud is a great way to go back and check for mistakes, check for hear it for voice, for word choices, sentence fluency. And if you can't hear it, take it to a professional tutor or have a friend read it, get some feedback on it somewhere.